When we begin to contemplate the concept of Gog and Magog, or Yajuj and Majuj, we are entering a realm that challenges both our imagination and our understanding of the human experience. These are not merely historical or mythical figures, they are signs, divinely ordained signs, that signal a reality beyond our normal comprehension, a trial that will test humanity in ways we can hardly anticipate. To fully appreciate the gravity of this trial, we must first step back and recognize the role of trials in the human story. Throughout history, human beings have faced challenges, famine, war, natural disasters. And yet, the trial represented by Gog and Magog is different. It is unprecedented in scale, scope, and intensity. It is not something we can prepare for through conventional means alone. This trial is a test of faith, of morality, and of our very understanding of human limits. The Quran references Gog and Magog in a manner that is brief but profoundly significant. In Surah Al-Kahf, the story of Dhul-Qarnayn introduces us to the barrier that he built to contain them. The narrative itself is fascinating, not because of the engineering feat, though that is impressive, but because of what it symbolizes. The recognition that some forces, though contained for a time, are inevitable. They will emerge when the time decreed by Allah arrives. There is a subtle, almost philosophical warning embedded in this story. There are limits to human control. There are boundaries we can set, but ultimately, certain events are beyond our manipulation. And here lies the first lesson. The trial of Gog and Magog reminds us that human beings, for all their intelligence and power, are finite creatures living within a divinely ordered universe. Yet this trial is not only external, it is internal as well. Gog and Magog will test the human psyche. They represent chaos, but more than that, they represent the confrontation with the unimaginable. Imagine the psychological impact of a force so overwhelming that it defies expectation. We are accustomed to thinking of trials as manageable, something we can respond to with strategy, planning, or courage. But here, courage alone is not enough. This trial demands a different kind of readiness, moral, spiritual, and existential preparedness. It asks us to reflect on our values, to examine the strength of our faith, and to question whether our attachment is to the fleeting comforts of this world or to the eternal wisdom of Allah. Furthermore, the emergence of Gog and Magog is a reminder of the fleeting nature of our own stability. Societies rise and fall. Civilizations build and crumble. And yet, the divine plan unfolds with a precision that is beyond human control. Their story forces us to consider the broader perspective, that history is not merely a sequence of human actions, but a tapestry of divine wisdom, where every trial, no matter how frightening, carries a lesson. For the believer, this is not a source of despair. It is a call to awaken, to strengthen one's spiritual resolve, and to recognize that true security is not found in walls or armies, but in reliance upon Allah, in adherence to moral principles, and in the cultivation of patience and foresight. As we contemplate Gog and Magog, it is crucial to internalize that the trial they represent is both imminent and inevitable. The warning is clear. There will come a time when no human strategy can fully contain the chaos. Our task is to prepare ourselves in ways that transcend the physical and the material. The first step is awareness, to understand that this trial is part of a divine narrative, that it serves a purpose, and that our response must be rooted in faith and moral clarity. So, as we begin this exploration, I urge you to consider this. Gog and Magog are not just a story from the past or a distant prophecy. They are a mirror reflecting our readiness, our character, and our relationship with the divine. They ask the ultimate question: when faced with the unimaginable, will you cling to what is fleeting, or will you anchor yourself in the eternal? Remember, the greatest trial is not only about survival, it is about who we become in the face of what we cannot control. When we move beyond the initial recognition of Gog and Magog as a profound trial, it becomes necessary to examine the historical and scriptural foundations that give this trial its weight and clarity. Understanding the background is not simply an exercise in history. It is an exercise in reflection and moral contemplation. The Quran and the Hadith, though concise in their references, provide profound insights into the nature of these forces and, more importantly, into the human condition when confronted with trials that exceed ordinary comprehension. In Surah Al-Kahf, the Quran tells us about Dhul-Qarnayn, a figure whose story offers us both historical context and philosophical depth. He is described as a just ruler, a leader of wisdom, who traveled to the far reaches of the earth. The narrative emphasizes his encounters with people in need, his efforts to establish justice, and finally, his encounter with communities threatened by Gog and Magog. Dhul-Qarnayn's response to the threat of Gog and Magog is instructive. He erects a barrier of iron and copper, fortified with strength and strategy, a wall designed to contain a force that could otherwise wreak havoc upon the world. The Quran emphasizes that this barrier was divinely guided. It was not merely a product of human ingenuity. This point is critical. The story is not about human power alone. It is about human responsibility within the limits set by divine will. Dhul-Qarnayn could act, could build, could plan, but he could not determine the ultimate timeline. The containment of Gog and Magog was temporary, and their eventual emergence is inevitable, a decree from Allah. This serves as a subtle reminder that no matter how advanced our technology, how brilliant our strategies, or how firm our resolve, there are forces beyond our control. Life itself is a series of boundaries we can manage but not ultimately dominate. The story also presents a philosophical reflection on morality and justice. Dhul-Qarnayn did not build the barrier for personal gain, for fame, or for dominance. He built it in response to injustice, to protect communities from harm, and to ensure that divine balance was maintained in the world. This is an essential aspect of the human response to trials, the ethical dimension. We are often tested not only by events themselves, but by how we choose to respond to them. When Gog and Magog eventually emerge, they will do so in a world that has been shaped by human choices, by our collective moral and ethical state. The Quran subtly suggests that the moral decay of societies plays a role in the timing and severity of such trials. The lesson is clear. The spiritual health of a society directly impacts its resilience when confronted with divine tests. Beyond the Quranic account, the Hadith literature offers additional depth, emphasizing the magnitude and scope of Gog and Magog's emergence. They are described as numerous beyond imagination, a force so vast that human defenses will seem inadequate. The Prophet Muhammad explained that their sudden appearance will be accompanied by chaos, scarcity, and fear. The descriptions are vivid, almost cinematic, yet their purpose is not to terrify for terror's sake. They are meant to awaken consciousness, to provoke reflection on human vulnerability and dependence on Allah. Psychologically, these narrations highlight a critical point. The greatest trials are not merely external. They infiltrate the human mind, sowing doubt, fear, and despair. The spiritual lesson is that true strength is not measured by wealth, weaponry, or intellect, but by steadfastness of faith and moral clarity in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. We can also reflect on the historical interpretations of these texts. Scholars throughout Islamic history, from the earliest commentators to modern thinkers, have grappled with the question, who are Gog and Magog, and what do they represent? Some have interpreted them literally as tribes or peoples in the far reaches of the earth. Others have seen them symbolically, as embodiments of chaos, corruption, and moral degradation. Both interpretations converge on a single insight. Gog and Magog are not random phenomena. They are integral to the divine plan, a mechanism through which the ultimate tests of human faith, resilience, and morality are enacted. This dual lens, literal and symbolic, enriches our understanding. It teaches us to consider both the tangible and intangible dimensions of trials. The trial is not only what we see with our eyes, but also what we perceive in our hearts and minds. Furthermore, the story of Dhul-Qarnayn and the barrier invites reflection on human ingenuity and limitation. Dhul-Qarnayn is praised for his wisdom, his ability to plan, and his fairness, yet even he cannot prevent the eventual emergence of Gog and Magog. Here is a profound philosophical point. Human effort, though necessary, is never sufficient on its own. There is always a higher order, a divine orchestration that exceeds human comprehension. This teaches humility, a recognition that while preparation and knowledge are essential, reliance on Allah remains paramount. The lesson resonates deeply in our contemporary world, where technological advancements and global networks give us a sense of control we have never experienced before. Gog and Magog remind us that true security is not in walls, weapons, or strategies. It is in alignment with divine guidance and ethical integrity. The narrative also provides a psychological framework for understanding fear, anticipation, and moral responsibility. Human beings are naturally inclined to resist the unknown, to deny forces that threaten our stability. Yet, the Quran encourages a balance: awareness without panic, preparation without obsession, moral action without despair. The emergence of Gog and Magog is not a call to helplessness, but to mindfulness. It is a call to examine our lives, to assess the state of our communities, and to cultivate virtues that will allow us to endure and respond wisely. In this sense, the story is as much about inner preparation as it is about external events. The true test of human character is revealed not when everything is easy, but when the unimaginable challenges arise. We also see an ethical and communal lesson embedded in the story. Dhul-Qarnayn acts not for himself alone, but for the protection of all people. This reminds us that human responses to trials are inherently collective. When Gog and Magog emerge, they will test not only individual faith, but also the moral fabric of society. Communities will face dilemmas: how to protect the weak, how to maintain justice, and how to act ethically in the midst of chaos. This dimension encourages reflection on our responsibilities today. Are we cultivating societies that can withstand trials with integrity, compassion, and justice? Or are we allowing moral decay to weaken the very structures that will be tested in the future? Finally, the historical and scriptural background of Gog and Magog teaches a profound spiritual lesson: that trials, no matter how terrifying or overwhelming, are never meaningless. Every warning, every narrative is designed to awaken consciousness, to guide moral reflection, and to prepare hearts and minds for the inevitable. The story of Dhul-Qarnayn, the barrier, and the eventual emergence of Gog and Magog is a mirror. It reflects our limitations, our responsibilities, and our potential for moral and spiritual growth. It challenges us to move beyond complacency, to recognize the fragility of worldly constructs, and to anchor our lives in principles that endure beyond the temporal. As we contemplate this history in Scripture, we are called to act, to cultivate patience, wisdom, and moral integrity, to strengthen faith and community, and to acknowledge that while the external world is unpredictable, the internal world, the world of the soul, is within our responsibility. The greatest lessons of Gog and Magog are not in the fear they inspire, but in the clarity they bring. Trials are inevitable, human effort is limited, and ultimate reliance must be on Allah. So, as we reflect on this story, let it awaken a sense of urgency, a call to ethical vigilance, and a recognition that preparation for divine trials is as much about cultivating the soul as it is about understanding the world. The history and scripture of Gog and Magog invite us not to despair but to rise, intellectually, morally, and spiritually, so that when the greatest trial before the end of time arrives, we are not paralyzed by fear, but anchored in wisdom, integrity, and faith. The past, the text, and the story are all mirrors, reflecting not just the emergence of Gog and Magog, but the readiness of our hearts and the clarity of our convictions. As we move deeper into the discussion of Gog and Magog, it becomes essential to confront the central question: what is the true nature of the trial they represent? In earlier points, we examined their historical and scriptural background, the story of Dhul-Qarnayn, and the philosophical lessons of human limitation and divine decree. Now, we confront the essence of the trial itself, a test that is unparalleled in both scope and intensity. This is not a trial that can be fully understood in conventional terms. It is not merely a war or natural disaster, nor is it a moral dilemma in isolation. It is a multidimensional challenge that engages the human mind, heart, and spirit simultaneously. Understanding the nature of this trial requires us to expand our imagination and confront the reality that some challenges transcend ordinary experience. The first aspect of this trial is its sheer scale. The Hadith literature describes Gog and Magog as countless, a force that humanity cannot possibly match in numbers or strength. This is not hyperbole for dramatic effect. It is meant to convey the overwhelming nature of the challenge. Imagine a force so vast that all conventional defenses, walls, armies, strategies, are rendered insignificant. The Quran itself emphasizes the inevitability of their emergence. This immediacy of inevitability introduces the psychological dimension of the trial. Human beings are wired to plan, control, and dominate their environment. We feel secure when we can predict outcomes and manipulate circumstances. Gog and Magog shatter this sense of control. They force us to confront our vulnerability in a stark and unavoidable manner. The trial is therefore both external, in the form of immense physical and societal disruption, and internal, in the form of psychological stress, fear, and existential questioning. The second dimension of this trial is moral and ethical. Gog and Magog are not just a physical threat. They are a test of human virtue and vice. They will emerge in a world already burdened by moral decay, corruption, and spiritual neglect. Their arrival amplifies existing weaknesses in human society. This is significant because it shifts the focus from the mere mechanics of survival to the deeper question of human character. In the face of chaos, individuals and communities are confronted with choices, whether to act ethically or exploit the crisis for personal gain, whether to protect the weak or prioritize self-interest, whether to maintain faith and moral clarity or succumb to despair and nihilism. The trial of Gog and Magog is thus inseparable from the moral condition of those who face it. The challenge is not only to withstand their force, but to preserve integrity in the midst of overwhelming pressure. In this sense, the trial tests the very essence of what it means to be human. We can also consider the trial from a social perspective. The emergence of Gog and Magog is described as catastrophic for societies, causing scarcity, disruption, and upheaval. This is more than a metaphorical warning. It is a reflection of the interconnectedness of human civilization. When a disruptive force strikes, it exposes the fragility of societal structures. Communities that are ethically, spiritually, and intellectually unprepared will crumble first. Those that have invested in compassion, justice, and collective resilience will fare better, not necessarily because they can physically resist, but because they are psychologically and morally equipped to navigate chaos. The trial, therefore, is a measure of societal maturity and foresight. It teaches a profound lesson. The stability of human civilization is contingent not only on material preparedness, but on ethical coherence and spiritual grounding. Another layer to consider is the temporal aspect of the trial. The Quran and Hadith describe the period of Gog and Magog's emergence as brief yet intense. The suddenness and severity of their appearance heighten the psychological challenge. Human beings are accustomed to gradual crises, to problems that can be anticipated and managed over time. The trial of Gog and Magog is different. It is sudden, overwhelming, and inescapable. This forces us to reflect on the impermanence of worldly security and the necessity of inner preparedness. The lesson is profound. The greatest trials do not allow for extended deliberation or reliance on external resources alone. They demand a readiness rooted in faith, moral clarity, and spiritual resilience. In this way, the trial is a mirror reflecting the preparedness of the soul rather than the accumulation of worldly power. Equally important is the spiritual dimension. The trial of Gog and Magog is a test of ultimate reliance on Allah. Human planning, knowledge, and resources, while important, are ultimately insufficient to contain the forces they represent. This reminds us of a fundamental principle in Islamic thought, that true security and stability are derived not from worldly measures alone, but from alignment with divine guidance. This is not a call to passivity, but a call to balance action with trust. We are required to act, to prepare, to strengthen our communities, to cultivate virtue, but also to recognize the limits of our control. The trial exposes the hubris of human arrogance and the necessity of humility before divine wisdom. It is a stark reminder that when the unimaginable occurs, human effort alone cannot suffice. It must be harmonized with spiritual awareness and moral responsibility. The trial also has an epistemological dimension. It challenges our understanding of reality. Gog and Magog represent forces that defy conventional reasoning, events that surpass ordinary human comprehension. When they emerge, they will confront humanity with a reality that seems chaotic, overwhelming, and almost unreal. This aspect of the trial tests our ability to maintain faith in the face of uncertainty. It asks us to hold fast to truth even when appearances suggest despair. Philosophically, this is an invitation to reflect on the nature of human knowledge. Our understanding is limited, and yet we are asked to navigate a world where forces beyond our comprehension exist. In essence, the trial of Gog and Magog is as much a cognitive and existential challenge as it is a physical or moral one. It forces a confrontation with the limits of human perception and the necessity of intellectual humility. Furthermore, the trial highlights the interplay between fear and hope. The narratives are meant to instill awareness of the impending challenge, but they are also meant to guide a measured response. Fear without hope leads to despair, while hope without fear leads to complacency. The trial of Gog and Magog requires the cultivation of a delicate balance. An acute awareness of danger, coupled with steadfast reliance on divine wisdom, moral action, and ethical resilience. This is why preparation is not purely about material readiness. It is about cultivating psychological fortitude, ethical clarity, and spiritual depth. The trial tests whether humanity can maintain equilibrium when confronted with forces that overwhelm ordinary perception and exceed conventional problem-solving. In addition, the trial challenges the very notion of human exceptionalism. Modern societies often operate under the illusion of control, believing that technology, governance, and strategy can manage any crisis. Gog and Magog shatter this illusion. They remind us that no matter how advanced human civilization becomes, there remain forces beyond control, limits to knowledge, and crises that demand moral and spiritual courage rather than technical prowess alone. This humbling lesson is crucial. It reorients our priorities, emphasizing that survival is not merely about physical endurance, but about cultivating virtues that endure beyond the temporal and material. It is a call to shift focus from dominance over nature to mastery over the self, from control over circumstances to integrity in action. Finally, the nature of this trial underscores the interconnectedness of human experience. The chaos introduced by Gog and Magog will not be isolated. It will ripple across societies, challenging communities collectively and individually. This emphasizes a key principle. Trials are communal as well as personal. The strength of society, the cohesion of community, and the resilience of collective ethics will determine how humanity navigates the upheaval. The trial asks profound questions. Will people respond with selfishness or solidarity? Will despair dominate, or will faith and morality guide action? Will the moral compass of communities hold under unprecedented stress? The trial is ultimately a reflection of human choices at every level: individual, social, and spiritual. In light of this, the emergence of Gog and Magog can be seen as the ultimate stress test for humanity. It tests our courage, wisdom, morality, faith, and resilience simultaneously. It challenges the mind, stretches the heart, and probes the soul. The trial is comprehensive in its scope, unparalleled in its intensity, and decisive in its moral and spiritual implications. It is a reminder that the greatest challenges are not merely obstacles to overcome. They are mirrors reflecting who we truly are, what we value, and where our reliance lies. So, as we reflect on the nature of the trial of Gog and Magog, we must recognize that preparation cannot be merely external. It cannot consist solely of fortifications, strategies, or plans. True preparation involves the cultivation of ethical integrity, spiritual resilience, moral courage, and psychological fortitude. The trial will expose weaknesses in all dimensions of human life, but it also offers an opportunity for profound growth. The emergence of Gog and Magog is, in a sense, an existential question posed to humanity. When confronted with the unimaginable, will we crumble in fear and moral compromise, or will we rise with steadfast faith, ethical clarity, and unwavering resolve? The trial of Gog and Magog is ultimately a test of human essence. It challenges every layer of our being: physical, psychological, social, and spiritual. It teaches that while external forces may overwhelm us, the cultivation of the soul, the strengthening of community ethics, and the maintenance of faith can withstand even the most unimaginable chaos. It calls upon us to reflect on our lives, to assess the strength of our communities, and to invest in virtues that endure beyond the temporary and material. And so, as we contemplate this unparalleled trial, let us internalize this truth. The greatest challenge before the end of time is not merely about survival. It is about who we are, what we stand for, and how we anchor ourselves when the world seems to collapse around us. Gog and Magog are not just a test of physical strength. They are the ultimate trial of character, faith, and moral vision. The question we face is not whether we will face adversity, but whether we will rise to it with integrity, wisdom, and steadfastness. And in this reflection lies the call to action. Prepare not just your walls, but your heart, not just your plans, but your principles, not just your defenses, but your soul. For the nature of this trial reminds us that true endurance is born of virtue, faith, and the courage to confront the unimaginable with clarity, conviction, and resolve. As we move deeper into understanding the trial of Gog and Magog, it becomes clear that no discussion of their emergence can be complete without reflecting on the lessons they hold for faith, patience, and reliance upon Allah. The previous points emphasized the scale, nature, and inevitability of this trial. We saw that it is unprecedented in its physical, psychological, and moral impact. Now we confront the heart of the matter. How should the believer respond, and what can we learn about the cultivation of spiritual resilience when faced with forces that are beyond human comprehension or control? The first lesson is rooted in faith itself in its truest and most profound sense. Faith in this context is not merely a set of beliefs or a ritual practice. It is an orientation of the soul, a lens through which we perceive reality, and a compass guiding action. The trial of Gog and Magog exposes the limitations of human control and the illusion of self-sufficiency. When faced with forces that are overwhelming, numbers that defy comprehension, and chaos that seems unstoppable, the believer must anchor themselves in the certainty of divine wisdom. The Quran repeatedly reminds us that Allah's plan encompasses all things, that what He decrees is both perfect and purposeful. Understanding this is not a passive intellectual exercise, it is an active cultivation of trust. Faith becomes a practical, living tool to navigate uncertainty. It transforms fear into awareness and anxiety into conscious preparation, without succumbing to despair or panic. Closely linked to faith is the cultivation of patience, or sabr, a central concept in Islamic thought. Patience is not mere endurance or resignation. It is the ability to remain steadfast, morally grounded, and spiritually alert in the face of adversity. The trial of Gog and Magog will not only test physical resilience, but also moral fortitude and spiritual composure. Patience requires a conscious choice to respond ethically, even when circumstances encourage moral compromise. It asks the believer to maintain integrity, to uphold justice, and to care for others even when survival instincts might suggest otherwise. Historically, we see examples of this principle echoed throughout the Quran and Hadith. Communities and individuals who endured trials with patience, guided by faith and moral clarity, emerged spiritually strengthened, even if material losses were significant. Gog and Magog represent a test of precisely this nature: the courage to remain upright and the wisdom to trust in the larger framework of divine order, even when immediate circumstances seem chaotic and hopeless. The lesson of reliance, or tawakkul, is equally profound. Reliance upon Allah is often misunderstood in superficial terms as passive trust. In reality, it is an active synergy between effort and surrender. The story of Dhul-Qarnayn illustrates this beautifully. He acted decisively to build the barrier against Gog and Magog, yet he did so within the recognition that ultimate outcomes are in Allah's hands. For the believer, this means that preparation, strategy, and action are necessary and commendable, but they must be balanced with acknowledgement of divine control. When Gog and Magog emerge, no plan alone will suffice. What distinguishes success, spiritually speaking, is the alignment of human action with moral and ethical guidance, and a conscious reliance on the one who orchestrates all outcomes. This dual approach effort, coupled with trust, is both psychologically stabilizing and spiritually empowering. It frees the believer from the paralysis of fear while instilling courage rooted in higher wisdom. The psychological dimension of these lessons cannot be overstated. Gog and Magog are described as forces that will generate not only physical destruction, but widespread fear, uncertainty, and moral panic. In the face of such trials, human beings often experience cognitive dissonance, the tension between what they can see and control and what remains beyond their grasp. Here, faith, patience, and reliance act as psychological anchors. They provide a framework for interpreting events, a compass for ethical decision-making, and a source of inner stability. Believers who cultivate these virtues are less likely to succumb to despair, hopelessness, or moral compromise. Instead, they maintain clarity, perspective, and composure even amidst chaos. The trial is as much about psychological resilience as it is about external endurance. Furthermore, these virtues have a communal dimension. The trial of Gog and Magog is not merely an individual challenge, it is a collective one. Communities will be tested in their ability to support one another, uphold justice, and act with compassion. Patience, faith, and reliance must be cultivated collectively as well as individually. This means nurturing ethical norms, supporting vulnerable members of society, and prioritizing justice even when it comes at a cost. The Prophet emphasized that trials affect the moral fabric of society and that collective integrity is vital. When communities anchor themselves in shared principles of faith, ethical action, and reliance upon divine wisdom, they are better equipped to weather the disruption and chaos that Gog and Magog represent. There is also a philosophical lesson embedded here. Trials such as these force us to confront the limitations of human reason and control. In contemporary society, we are accustomed to believing that human ingenuity, science, and governance can solve almost any problem. Gog and Magog serve as a profound reminder that there are forces beyond human mastery, events that demand humility and spiritual preparedness. The believer's task is not to overcome the world through sheer power or intellect alone, but to cultivate virtues that allow for moral and spiritual survival. Faith, patience, and reliance upon Allah are the instruments through which human limitations are transcended. They elevate the individual beyond mere survival instincts into a state of moral and spiritual awareness. Moreover, these lessons underscore the importance of proactive preparation, not only in physical or societal terms, but in spiritual and ethical terms. The emergence of Gog and Magog is inevitable, but the response is a reflection of internal cultivation. Strengthening faith, developing moral clarity, and deepening reliance upon Allah are forms of preparation that endure beyond the temporal. They shape how one perceives and responds to trials. While the physical consequences of such an event may be immense, the spiritual state of the believer determines whether the trial results in despair or in profound growth. The Quran emphasizes that trials are a means of refining the soul, testing sincerity, and cultivating virtues that endure eternally. Another dimension of this lesson is the cultivation of hope alongside awareness of danger. The narratives about Gog and Magog are vivid and alarming, yet they are coupled with guidance and reassurance. The believer is encouraged to act with diligence and vigilance while maintaining hope in divine mercy and justice. This dual approach, recognizing the severity of the trial while trusting in Allah's wisdom, prevents both complacency and despair. It fosters a balanced psychological and spiritual state, empowering individuals and communities to respond with integrity, courage, and foresight. It is also important to note that these lessons transcend temporal and geographic boundaries. The principles of faith, patience, and reliance are not limited to a specific era or culture. They apply universally, emphasizing that the greatest trials in human history, from natural disasters to societal upheavals, can be navigated successfully through moral and spiritual preparation. Gog and Magog, as the ultimate eschatological test, amplify these principles to their fullest extent. They remind us that the cultivation of the soul, the grounding in ethical principles, and the strengthening of reliance on Allah are not optional but essential. The trial also offers a perspective on human priorities. When confronted with forces like Gog and Magog, the emphasis shifts from material accumulation and worldly power to inner strength, ethical clarity, and spiritual resilience. The believer learns that true preparation is not in wealth, weapons, or social influence alone, but in the cultivation of virtues that endure beyond immediate circumstances. Faith, patience, and reliance are the tools through which one navigates uncertainty while preserving moral and spiritual integrity. In reflecting on these lessons, one realizes that the trial of Gog and Magog is ultimately a call to transformation. It is a challenge to rise above fear, self-interest, and superficial understanding. It is an invitation to cultivate a deep, abiding faith, to exercise patience with wisdom and foresight, and to rely upon Allah in both action and surrender. These lessons are not abstract, they are profoundly practical. They guide decision making, shape moral behavior, and fortify psychological resilience. They prepare the individual and the community to face the unimaginable with clarity, courage, and integrity. And so, as we internalize these teachings, the challenge becomes personal. How do we live in a state of readiness without succumbing to fear? How do we act ethically when circumstances are chaotic? And how do we maintain hope when the world seems uncertain? The trial of Gog and Magog is a mirror reflecting our inner state. It asks, are our lives anchored in faith, guided by patience, and fortified by reliance upon Allah? Or are we dependent solely on human measures, vulnerable to despair, and unprepared for the inevitability of divine tests? In conclusion, the emergence of Gog and Magog is more than a historical or prophetic narrative. It is a profound lesson in the cultivation of the human spirit. Faith provides certainty amidst uncertainty. Patience sustains moral and psychological resilience, and reliance upon Allah aligns effort with wisdom beyond human comprehension. These virtues transform the trial from an overwhelming threat into an opportunity for profound spiritual and moral growth. The question before each of us is not whether the trial will occur, it will, but how we will respond. Will we be paralyzed by fear, or will we rise with integrity, courage, and steadfastness? The lessons are clear. Anchor your heart in faith, cultivate patience in the face of adversity, and place your trust in Allah's wisdom. For it is through these virtues that the greatest trials reveal the depth and resilience of the human soul. As we continue our exploration of Gog and Magog, it is essential to understand not only the nature of the trial they represent, but also the signs that precede their emergence. In Islamic eschatology, the unfolding of events before the last day is not random. It follows a divine pattern designed to test humanity's awareness, preparedness, and moral clarity. Recognizing these signs is crucial because it allows the believer to cultivate mindfulness, strengthen faith, and align actions with the principles that will guide them through unprecedented trials. The signs are not meant merely to create curiosity or fear. They are guidance, a roadmap for reflection and preparation. They ask us to examine our spiritual, moral, and societal states before calamity strikes, ensuring that when the inevitable moment comes, we are not unmoored from purpose or principle. The first category of signs is moral and spiritual deterioration. The Hadith literature and Quranic narratives repeatedly emphasize that Gog and Magog will emerge in a world characterized by widespread corruption, injustice, and moral decay. This is not coincidental. It is part of the divine design. Human virtue, collective ethics, and societal coherence are intimately linked to the severity of trials. When societies allow oppression, deceit, greed, and injustice to flourish, they weaken their own spiritual and moral resilience. The signs leading up to Gog and Magog therefore often manifest as increasing immorality, the normalization of vice, and the erosion of ethical and spiritual principles. This is a profound reminder. Trials are never isolated from human responsibility. The external chaos that will accompany Gog and Magog is deeply intertwined with the internal state of communities, the health of their moral and spiritual fabric. A second category is social and political instability. Throughout history, scholars have noted that eschatological signs often include widespread disorder, conflicts, and the collapse of traditional structures of justice and governance. These conditions make societies more vulnerable when Gog and Magog appear. The Quran and Hadith describe humanity as being dispersed, divided, and often preoccupied with self-interest at the expense of communal welfare. This social fragmentation is itself a precursor to the trial. Philosophically, this teaches a timeless lesson. When communities lose cohesion, justice, and ethical awareness, they invite calamity, whether that comes in the form of natural disasters, human conflict, or in the eschatological sense, the emergence of Gog and Magog. Recognizing the signs is therefore not passive observation. It is an active assessment of societal health. Are communities nurturing virtue, justice, and solidarity, or are they fragmenting under the weight of selfishness and corruption? Another critical set of signs is the emergence of other eschatological phenomena, particularly the appearance of Dajjal. In Islamic tradition, Dajjal is the false messiah, a figure whose arrival is a precursor to Gog and Magog. His appearance signifies a period of extreme deception, moral confusion, and spiritual testing. The Hadith literature emphasizes that people will be tested in their ability to discern truth from falsehood, to hold fast to faith amidst overwhelming temptation and misguidance. The rise of Dajjal is both literal and symbolic. It represents the intensification of moral trials and the human susceptibility to illusion, greed, and fear. The connection to Gog and Magog is significant because it illustrates a pattern. Before the most extreme trials, human societies are confronted with cumulative moral and spiritual tests. Recognizing the signs of Dajjal and responding with ethical and spiritual vigilance prepares the believer for the even greater challenges that follow. Economic instability and scarcity are also recurring signs. The Quran and Hadith highlight that periods preceding the emergence of Gog and Magog are often marked by shortages, the collapse of equitable distribution, and social upheaval due to material deprivation. These conditions are both practical and symbolic. Practically, scarcity tests the capacity of individuals and communities to act ethically, to share resources, and to maintain justice under pressure. Symbolically, economic hardship highlights the impermanence of worldly stability and the necessity of anchoring one's trust not in material wealth, but in divine providence. Scarcity is a reminder that preparation is not solely about accumulating resources, but about cultivating patience, fairness, and moral resilience in the face of uncertainty. It is also a psychological test, exposing fear, selfishness, and moral weakness, while providing an opportunity to develop empathy, foresight, and collective responsibility. Natural phenomena and environmental disruptions also play a role in the signs. Many scholars have noted that before eschatological trials, there is often a breakdown of the natural order or an increase in calamities such as earthquakes, floods, and other disasters. These events function on multiple levels. They serve as reminders of human vulnerability, they highlight the limits of human control, and they are markers of the broader divine plan unfolding. The signs in this sense are both external and internal. They confront us with reality, reminding us that the world is not solely a human domain, but a creation governed by divine wisdom. Observing these signs with reflection, rather than fear or denial, allows humanity to cultivate humility, awareness, and moral vigilance. Another profound sign is the erosion of spiritual leadership and moral guidance. Societies in decline are often marked by the absence of righteous leaders who uphold justice, virtue, and knowledge. The absence of ethical guidance creates a vacuum that allows corruption, selfishness, and chaos to thrive. This lack of spiritual and moral leadership is an essential precursor to Gog and Magog. It is not simply the absence of authority that matters, but the absence of principled, morally anchored authority. Philosophically, this teaches that human societies cannot rely solely on material power or governance structures. The quality of guidance, the integrity of leadership, and the cultivation of virtue in communal institutions are critical indicators of resilience in the face of trials. Technological advancement and human hubris also appear in eschatological reflection as subtle signs. In contemporary interpretations, the growing illusion of self-sufficiency, reliance on material power, and faith in human intellect alone are seen as modern precursors to the trial of Gog and Magog. The narratives emphasize that no matter how advanced human civilization becomes, there remain forces beyond comprehension and control. These signs serve as reminders that progress without ethical and spiritual grounding can leave societies vulnerable. Technological and material capabilities must be coupled with moral insight and spiritual awareness, or they risk being rendered irrelevant when true trials emerge. The signs leading to the emergence of Gog and Magog are cumulative, layered, and interconnected. Each sign, moral decay, social fragmentation, the rise of Dajjal, economic scarcity, natural disturbances, the absence of righteous leadership, and human hubris, functions as a signal and a test. They are meant to awaken reflection, to encourage proactive cultivation of virtue, and to guide preparation not merely in material terms, but in spiritual, ethical, and communal dimensions. They are also profoundly psychological. They challenge complacency, stimulate critical awareness, and encourage the cultivation of resilience in the face of uncertainty. Recognizing these signs is in itself an act of moral and spiritual engagement. It requires observation, reflection, and the courage to act in alignment with principles rather than convenience. Psychologically, The anticipation of Gog and Magog can create anxiety, fear, or fatalism. The Quran and Hadith, however, provide guidance on how to navigate these emotional challenges. The signs are meant to instill vigilance without despair. Awareness of preceding signs should motivate preparation, ethical conduct, and spiritual reflection, rather than panic or hopelessness. This balance, recognizing danger while maintaining faith, hope, and moral clarity, is essential. It reflects a profound understanding of human psychology. Humans respond to crises not only with action, but with internal states, and the cultivation of courage, patience, and insight is indispensable. The signs also emphasize the principle of accountability. Human beings are not passive observers of history. They actively shape the moral and spiritual landscape that determines their resilience. Recognizing the signs is a call to self-examination. Are we cultivating justice, compassion, integrity, and faith in our personal lives and communities? Are we contributing to the moral and ethical resilience necessary to face trials? Or are we allowing selfishness, greed, and complacency to weaken the foundations of our societies? The signs are mirrors reflecting human choices, revealing both vulnerability and potential for growth. The cumulative effect of these signs serves as a profound philosophical lesson. The future is not only determined by external events, but by the internal state of humanity. The trial of Gog and Magog, while inevitable, is preceded by opportunities for moral, spiritual, and psychological preparation. Each sign is a reminder that human action, guided by ethical awareness, faith, and reflection, can shape the capacity to endure. They are not arbitrary. They are integrated into a divine framework where observation, reflection, and preparation are themselves acts of moral and spiritual responsibility. Finally, the recognition of these signs emphasizes hope and empowerment. While the trial of Gog and Magog is daunting, the signs are opportunities for proactive cultivation of virtue and wisdom. Awareness allows communities to strengthen ethical norms, support vulnerable members, and prepare spiritually for what is to come. The signs are invitations to align human action with divine guidance, to reinforce social and moral structures, and to cultivate a readiness that transcends fear or panic. They remind us that even in the face of inevitable trials, preparation, faith, and ethical vigilance can transform vulnerability into resilience. In conclusion, the signs preceding the emergence of Gog and Magog are not mere portents of fear. They are guidance for reflection, moral assessment, and spiritual preparation. They are both warning and opportunity, revealing the vulnerabilities of human society while offering pathways for ethical, communal, and spiritual fortification. The trial of Gog and Magog will inevitably arrive, but the signs preceding it allow humanity to prepare in ways that transcend material measures. They ask us to cultivate virtue, strengthen faith, uphold justice, and act with foresight. By observing these signs and internalizing their lessons, we can meet the greatest trial before the end of time not with panic, but with clarity, courage, and steadfastness. The ultimate reflection is this: the signs are not distant or abstract. They are present in the moral, social, and spiritual state of our lives today. They call upon us to act, to prepare, and to align ourselves with principles that endure. When Gog and Magog emerge, they will test everything: faith, integrity, resilience, and wisdom. But the signs provide a roadmap. Observe, reflect, and act in accordance with divine guidance, and the trial, no matter how overwhelming, becomes an opportunity for spiritual growth, moral fortitude, and collective awakening. As we reach the final stage of our reflection on Gog and Magog, it is essential to step back and consider the broader picture. What do all these lessons, signs, and reflections mean for us, both individually and collectively? We have traversed the historical and scriptural narratives, examined the nature of the trial, and considered the moral, psychological, and spiritual implications. We have explored the signs that precede their emergence and reflected on the cultivation of faith, patience, and reliance upon Allah as essential tools to navigate the unimaginable. And now, in this concluding segment, we confront perhaps the most profound question: how do we translate these insights into meaning, preparation, and purposeful action in our lives today? The first point of reflection is the inevitability of the trial. Throughout our exploration, one theme has emerged with striking clarity. The emergence of Gog and Magog is not hypothetical. It is decreed, inevitable, and part of the divine plan. The Quran and Hadith leave no ambiguity on this point. This inevitability carries a profound psychological and philosophical weight. Human beings naturally resist acknowledging forces beyond their control. We cling to illusions of permanence, comfort, and mastery over our environment. The trial of Gog and Magog shatters these illusions. It confronts us with the reality that there are events beyond human capacity to predict, prevent, or fully understand. This realization can be unsettling, but it is also deeply liberating. It forces us to focus on what is truly within our power, our moral choices, our spiritual cultivation, and the ethical integrity with which we navigate the uncertainties of life. From a psychological perspective, understanding inevitability is crucial. Many of the fears that haunt human beings are rooted in uncertainty and the illusion of control. By recognizing that some trials are inevitable, we remove the psychological burden of imagining every possible contingency or obsessing over outcomes beyond our reach. Instead, we can redirect energy toward what truly matters, strengthening the self, fostering ethical communities, and cultivating trust in divine wisdom. In essence, inevitability is not a call to despair. It is a call to clarity, focus, and moral responsibility. It asks us to ask a deeper question. If the greatest trial is coming, what kind of human beings, what kind of communities, and what kind of souls do we aspire to be when that moment arrives? Closely linked to inevitability is the principle of preparation, not merely in material or strategic terms, but in spiritual, ethical, and psychological terms. The lessons of faith, patience, and reliance on Allah that we discussed earlier are not abstract ideals. They are practical tools for preparation. Spiritual preparation means cultivating a personal connection with the divine, developing moral discernment, and nurturing virtues that endure beyond circumstance. Ethical preparation involves building communities rooted in justice, compassion, and integrity, so that when crises strike, human responses are guided by principle rather than panic or self-interest. Psychological preparation involves cultivating resilience, clarity, and the ability to confront fear without being paralyzed by it. Taken together, these forms of preparation equip humanity not merely to survive trials, but to emerge from them with moral and spiritual growth intact. Another critical insight emerges when we consider the broader philosophical implications of Gog and Magog. Their trial is in many ways a reflection of human history itself. Time and again, civilizations have faced seemingly insurmountable challenges: invasions, disasters, corruption, and moral crises. What distinguishes societies and individuals who endure is not necessarily material power, but the depth of their ethical and spiritual grounding. Gog and Magog represent the ultimate extension of this principle. They amplify the challenges humanity has always faced, forcing us to confront not only external chaos, but internal weakness, moral compromise, and spiritual complacency. This philosophical perspective reframes the trial as a mirror. It reflects humanity's current condition, exposing both vulnerabilities and opportunities for growth. The trial also carries profound ethical lessons. When confronted with overwhelming forces, human beings are often tempted to abandon principles, prioritize self-interest, or exploit chaos for personal gain. Gog and Magog test the moral fabric of individuals and societies alike. The narratives emphasize that human choices in the face of adversity matter deeply. Ethical action becomes not just a moral obligation, but a measure of true resilience. Communities that uphold justice, compassion, and collective responsibility are better equipped to withstand trials, not necessarily because physical conditions are favorable, but because moral clarity provides stability and coherence amidst chaos. The trial forces a confrontation with the timeless question: when external circumstances are beyond our control, how will we respond? With selfishness, fear, or moral compromise? Or with courage, integrity, and compassion? From a spiritual standpoint, the trial highlights the limits of human agency. Gog and Magog represent forces that cannot be contained by human power, strategy, or intellect alone. This is a profound reminder of the necessity of reliance upon Allah. Reliance is not passive. It is active alignment with divine guidance, the recognition that human effort and divine wisdom must work together. When we prepare spiritually, morally, and psychologically and place our trust in Allah, we cultivate an inner resilience that external circumstances cannot destroy. This principle has profound implications for daily life. It reminds us that ultimate security is not found in wealth, technology, or human control, but in alignment with principles that transcend the temporal world. Faith, patience, and reliance are the scaffolding upon which true endurance is built. The emergence of Gog and Magog also brings to the forefront the interconnectedness of humanity. The trial is not purely individual, it is collective. Societies are tested as systems of moral and ethical responsibility, social cohesion, and communal support. When chaos descends, it reveals both the weaknesses and strengths of human networks. Ethical negligence, selfishness, and injustice are amplified under pressure, while moral vigilance, compassion, and solidarity are rewarded with resilience. The trial teaches that the endurance of communities is inseparable from the cultivation of individual virtue. Our personal preparation is meaningful, but it reaches its fullest potential when extended to collective ethical and spiritual responsibility. A psychological dimension of reflection emerges here as well. Anticipating the trial of Gog and Magog can naturally generate fear, anxiety, or even fatalism. Yet the narratives are not designed to paralyze. They are designed to cultivate awareness and intentionality. Psychological preparedness involves accepting the inevitability of trials while maintaining agency in moral, ethical, and spiritual domains. It encourages reflection on personal and communal priorities, the cultivation of virtues that endure, and the development of resilience that can withstand both external and internal pressures. In essence, the trial becomes not only a test of circumstance, but a tool for inner cultivation, sharpening moral and spiritual faculties in ways that ordinary experience rarely demands. The trial also invites reflection on the temporal and eternal dimensions of human existence. Material structures, social hierarchies, and worldly power are all transient. They offer only temporary security. Gog and Magog force humanity to confront this reality in its starkest form. What endures is the cultivation of the soul, the practice of ethical action, and the alignment of effort with divine guidance. This perspective is deeply liberating because it shifts focus from what is ultimately fragile to what is enduring. The trial then is not merely an external catastrophe, it is an existential challenge asking humanity to orient itself toward what is eternal, meaningful, and morally coherent. Philosophically, the trial also illuminates human freedom and responsibility. While the emergence of Gog and Magog is inevitable, the response of individuals and communities is not predetermined. Human choices, how we act, whom we help, what principles we uphold, are decisive in determining the moral and spiritual outcome of the trial. This is a profound reminder that trials, no matter how overwhelming, are not merely tests of endurance, but of character, integrity, and moral imagination. They invite reflection on the kinds of human beings and societies we aspire to cultivate, both in preparation for extraordinary trials and in the ordinary course of life. As we synthesize these reflections, a powerful pattern emerges. The trial of Gog and Magog is multifaceted. It challenges the physical, tests the psychological, scrutinizes the moral, and refines the spiritual. It is at once a mirror reflecting the state of humanity and a lens through which we can anticipate and cultivate resilience. The trial does not annihilate purpose, it illuminates it. It does not merely expose weakness, it highlights opportunities for moral and spiritual growth. The narratives teach that even in the face of overwhelming chaos, the human soul retains the capacity for courage, discernment, and ethical action. In practical terms, what does this mean for us today? It means that our preparation cannot be passive or superficial. We must cultivate personal faith, ethical awareness, and spiritual resilience. We must engage in acts of justice, compassion, and solidarity within our communities. We must anticipate uncertainty with moral clarity and psychological fortitude. We must anchor our trust in Allah, recognizing both the necessity of effort and the limits of human control. And we must educate ourselves and others to recognize the signs of trials, cultivating a collective moral consciousness capable of withstanding extraordinary challenges. Ultimately, the reflection on Gog and Magog culminates in hope and empowerment. Though their emergence represents the greatest trial before the end of time, the guidance provided in the Quran and Hadith equips humanity with the tools to navigate it successfully, not through fear alone, but through preparation, integrity, and alignment with divine wisdom. The narratives inspire courage, moral vigilance, and spiritual maturity. They transform the prospect of trial from despair into opportunity, an opportunity to test, refine, and strengthen character, to cultivate communities rooted in justice and virtue, and to anchor lives in principles that endure beyond circumstance. And so, as we draw this reflection to a close, the central message is clear. Gog and Magog, with all their overwhelming force and chaos, are ultimately a mirror, a reflection of the state of human hearts, societies, and souls. They test what is within human control, our choices, our ethics, our moral courage, and reveal what is beyond it, the unfolding divine plan. The trial challenges us to rise above fear, selfishness, and complacency. It calls upon us to cultivate faith, patience, reliance, moral clarity, and communal solidarity. It reminds us that true endurance is not measured by material strength or strategic ingenuity, but by the cultivation of the soul, the integrity of character, and the alignment of effort with divine wisdom. In conclusion, Gog and Magog are not only a trial to endure, they are an opportunity to reflect, grow, and prepare. They invite us to examine our lives, communities, and values in light of the ultimate test. They remind us that adversity is not merely destructive. It is transformative when approached with faith, patience, and reliance upon Allah. The question before each of us is not whether the trial will occur at will, but how we will respond when it does. Will we rise with courage, integrity, and steadfastness, anchored in eternal principles, or will we succumb to fear, chaos, and moral compromise? The answer lies in the conscious cultivation of faith, virtue, and wisdom today, so that when the greatest trial before the end of time unfolds, we are ready not only to endure, but to emerge spiritually stronger, morally resilient, and aligned with the divine purpose that governs all things.